We're about halfway through our program now, believe it or not. Let's go back to Steve Bagwell. Your question, sir, for Suzanne Bonamici.
All right. Suzanne, I'd like to ask you about illegal immigration. It's an issue that's divided the country along many different fault lines in recent years. I wondered if you're seeking a federal job where that's issue is going to come into major play. I wondered if you had a prescription for the problem, and if so, you could detail it for me.
Well, the prescription for the problem is we certainly need comprehensive immigration reform, and the prescription for the problem is getting someone in office who has a record of being able to bring people around the table, identify the problem, find common solutions that work. That's a big challenge with immigration. We first need to crack down on our borders and make sure that we are not allowing people to come into this country illegally. However, we have many businesses here who want to participate in the conversation, especially businesses in the First District, of how we can find a path to citizenship. We need leaders in Congress with the experience that I have of being able to bring together disparate groups with differing opinions, find a common solution, enact that into law.
Mr. Cornilles?
Well, one of the solutions that's been at the forefront for many years is securing our border, yet we haven't done it. We haven't done it sufficiently. As a result, down on the southern border of our country, tens of thousands of individuals have been killed in drug wars, and that crime is infiltrating into our communities. Not to mention child trafficking, which is a huge dilemma. In fact, it's a plague on our state and our city of Portland. It's something that is largely infiltrated through illegal immigration. So the first thing that we have to do before we can address important issues such as education and health care and the economy and public safety is secure our borders. And I'm happy to say that there are companies right here in the First District who have technologies that if they had a champion in Congress, we could actually push them in front of the curtain and say, here's an Oregon company that has a solution for a national problem.
Suzanne Bonamici, the rebuttal is yours.
I don't have a rebuttal this time.
That's perfectly fine. We will move on to the next question then. And Patrick Preston, you will direct your question to Mr. Cornilles, please.
Thank you, Steve. I'd like to talk about Medicare for a second. Rob, you have criticized Senator Bonamici for supporting Medicare cuts. PolitiFact labeled that criticism false in this case and in other cases around the country where that same criticism has been used against other candidates. I'd like to ask both candidates, one, do you think the criticism is fair? And two, what is your position on the future of Medicare and protecting it from cuts?
First of all, to address your question, Patrick, it's not a false accusation that the health care bill eliminated $500 billion from Medicare. Because even last Sunday, Senator John Kerry, the Democrat nominee for president just a few years ago, and the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, where the health care bill was largely written, even he said on national television that they cut $550 billion from Medicare. I think if anyone should know, it would be him. So here's the problem. Medicare needs reform. It's not sustainable right now in its present state. And we have an obligation to our seniors to make sure that that program is there for them. They've earned it. They've worked into the system. So I support real reform, and I believe we should start by going back to something that was produced a year ago. It's called the Bowles-Simpson Report. It was a bipartisan commission set up by our president, and since it was created in December of 10, it's been put in a desk drawer. No politician has the courage to address it.
Suzanne Bonamici.
Yes, thank you for bringing up that point about the attack that was lobbied on me the very first day after the primary election, an attack that I supported cutting Medicare, which PolitiFact found to be false. And I just refer the viewers to that article. What we need to do is, again, it's a matter of priorities. Medicare is part of a promise that we've made to seniors and people who need that care. And we can start by allowing negotiation on prescription drug costs, just as we do in Oregon. That would save millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars over the years. And we can crack down on Medicare fraud. Once we do those two things, we'll have made a big step toward saving Medicare. We need people in Congress who have the courage to say, yes, I will go up against the pharmaceutical industry and say we need to negotiate prescription drug prices.
Rob Cornilles, 30-second rebuttal.
I would like to point out that over the last several months, many people have said that I want to privatize Social Security and Medicare. Nothing could be further from the truth. Let's talk a little bit also about Medicare Advantage. That's a choice that seniors have. And 254,000 Oregon seniors have chosen that program to receive their Medicare coverage. And yet, largely, that program will be cut, or rather slashed, because of the $500 billion that's taken out through the Affordable Care Act. That's a cut, ladies and gentlemen. And now seniors will have a $400 bill next year to make up the difference.
Teresa Myers, next question is from you to Suzanne Bonamici.
Okay, moving from seniors and medication to children and food, the number of children receiving subsidized food, breakfast, lunch, and snacks in our schools has grown exponentially in the last few years, and the number of families receiving food assistance is at a record high. The western part of our congressional district is among the hungriest in our state. How else could we increase food security rather than increasing government aid? And is there a danger in teaching children to depend upon schools for their nutritional needs rather than family?
Well, first, you've identified a serious problem. There are too many people out of work in this state and across the 1st Congressional District. And our rural areas and places like Columbia County, where the unemployment is high, yes, there are problems. And I'm quite aware of the need. In fact, in the last legislative session, I sponsored a bill to make the after-school meal program more available to community centers and schools across this state, because there is a need. Is there a danger in teaching children that? There's a danger in having children who are hungry. That's the danger. And most families I know, and I learned this from working at Legal Aid with low-income families, they're not struggling by choice. They're struggling because they lost a job or lost a spouse or had medical bills they couldn't pay. So the danger is having kids who are hungry. Let's get people back to work by electing a leader who has a record of accomplishment in creating policy that will rebuild the economy and create jobs for Oregonians.
Rob Cornilles.
Well, certainly food insecurity is a huge problem in our state. We're #1 in the country, according to a recent report. And we're in the top when it comes to poverty, homelessness, etc. These are not records we want, ladies and gentlemen. Here in Oregon, we're better than this. If we continue to think like we've always thought, we'll continue to get what we've always got. It's time to change leaders. It's time to change policy. It's time to look at different ways. Recently, I visited the Oregon Food Bank, a fantastic organization, and they need our help. They need citizens like you and I going and volunteering our time and giving of our resources to help our neighbors. And that's true compassion. That's what Oregonians are made of. But in the end, I must say, more than wanting a handout, Oregonians want a job. They want to find leaders who can help create an environment where job growth occurs in this state. Just throwing more policy, throwing more taxation, throwing more roadblocks in front of getting a job is not going to help anyone in the long run, especially our kids.
Suzanne Bonamici, of 30-second rebuttal.
One of the things that's really going to help students, and it's going to help people across this district, is leading to better health outcomes. And we've started in Oregon a farm-to-school bill so that school food is more nutritious. And one of the things that I'm going to be looking at is we're talking about new ways of doing things. Why are we subsidizing big agricultural industries that produce products that lead to poor health outcomes? Let's redirect some of those dollars to our local farmers, especially in the 1st Congressional District, that grow healthy food like nuts and berries so that we can lead to better outcomes in health for our citizens.
John Schrag, the question is yours, and it is for Rob Cornilles.
Rob, so far we've given you and Suzanne some fairly open-ended questions which have allowed you a fair amount of wiggle room. So here's one that's a little bit more focused. Please give a letter grade, A to F, to the following elected officials based on their performance over the past year. And you can give a one-sentence explanation for your grade. President Barack Obama, U.S. House Speaker John Boehner, Oregon Governor John Kitzhaber, and State Senator Suzanne Bonamici. You can't weasel out of it by giving them a grade of incomplete.
You're a tough teacher, John. Well, first of all, as it relates to President Obama, I think that right now, in light of the fact that we have continual unemployment above 9%, the largest sustained unemployment rate above 9 that we've had in our country's history, the fact that we have continual developments overseas that are hurting our country and putting us at risk, the fact that there's so much uncertainty and a lack of confidence, and frankly, the American people don't have any trust in their government. I'd have to say that President Obama gets a C-, if that. As far as John Boehner, I think his charge to try to repeal health care when he knew it couldn't make it through the Senate was once again a useless exercise. I understand the principle he's trying to convey, but it's time to do something. It's time to take action and fix problems, not just create some theatrical presence. As far as our governor, I would probably refrain from grading our governor, John, because I'm running for a federal position, not a state position. As far as Senator Bonamici, I think she has good intentions. I think that she's a senator who has a track record, though, that is not right for the 1st District.
Suzanne Bonamici, we want to hear your grading now, if you can.
Do I get the same question?
Same question.
I get to grade myself. President Obama, I support President Obama. I watched the Republican debates, and frankly, I don't see anyone there who I would want representing this country. President Obama has faced significant challenges. He took over when we had serious financial collapse beginning, and he's been up against big challenges. But I give him a B because he's working hard. I think he could have gone farther in some areas. I think the Affordable Care Act should have had a public option to make sure more people were covered. John Boehner, I don't question that he believes he's doing a good job representing his constituents. However, I believe that he's someone who does just lead his party to be an obstructionist and block policy when he should be creating policy that's better for Oregonians. Governor Kitzhaber, I give him an A. I think he's done an excellent job of leading our state so far, and I've worked with him through the legislature, and myself, I ran out of time.
We'll let you get that one in. We want to hear that one.
I'll give myself an A. I work hard. I've served on many committees, and I've really been able to get the work done, bringing people together around the table and creating solutions that work.
Okay. Mr. Cornilles, a rebuttal on the grading?
Sure. I'd like to mention something that I brought up when we began the debate, and that is, when I look back as one who was raised in Oregon at great public leaders, I see people like Mark Hatfield. I see people like Bob Packwood, who had quite a mind for fiscal issues, who actually helped to reform the tax code in the 1980s. Vic Atiyeh, who was a governor when I was in high school and college. These people, it didn't matter what their party affiliation was, they simply brought people together and they produced positive results for our state. We need more of that.
We're going to go all the way back around to Steve Bagwell. You're up again, Steve. Your first question for Suzanne Bonamici.
All right. If you'd been sitting on this year's Congressional Deficit Supercommittee, I'm just wondering how things would have been different. If you have some specific ideas on how we could have bridged the gap and brokered some type of workable compromise, where maybe you would have put off limits, if anything, where you would have put the balance between revenue and spending.
Well, first I want to say that I share the disappointment of many of you here across the state and across the nation that the super committee was not able to reach a compromise. I would have approached that task just as I've approached many of the other issues that I've worked on as an Oregon State Senator and Representative. That's bringing people to the table and having a discussion about what we needed to do. And as I've mentioned before, we can't tax our way out. We can't cut our way out of this serious situation. We need leaders in Congress who have experience bringing people together, discussing all of the alternatives, and then importantly, going back to our colleagues and convincing them that we need to make some tough choices. I've made some tough choices as an Oregon State legislator. We balance our budget, and that hasn't been easy, but I've made tough choices, and we got the work done. That's the kind of work ethic that I'll bring to Congress.
Mr. Cornilles.
You know, the task of the super committee was not that difficult if you could look at it in historical perspective. In 1997, we had a Democrat president and a Republican Congress, and together they learned to balance the budget. They negotiated a deal that not only balanced the budget, it grew the economy, produced 10 million jobs, and also kept unemployment around 4%. So compromise is possible. Consensus building is the way this country was built. And we need people, obviously, especially from the 1st District, who have experience in this. And professionally, I've been fortunate to work in almost every major market in this country. Work with very diverse groups, socioeconomically, both as far as their educational and their professional background as well. And I don't really care what party they come from. I just simply want to know, are you ready to get something done? Let's work together. But having someone who voted 98% of the time with their party in Salem is not going to produce that type of result.
Suzanne Bonamici, you have 30 seconds if you'd like.
Yes, part of the problem is that there are too many people in Congress who forget that they're representing their constituents, and instead they're making decisions based on politics. And again, this 98% that my opponent keeps talking about shows a misunderstanding of my track record and the way that we do things in the Oregon legislature. Most of the bills we pass are either unanimous or bipartisan, and my experience in things like cracking down on payday lending and making sure that small businesses get access to the loans that they need, and things like making sure that people have the way to prevent foreclosure. All of those things I've worked on have been done in a bipartisan way.
Patrick Preston, you are up next, sir. Rob Cornilles.
Another question from a KATU viewer. This from KATU viewer Chris Hudnall, who asks, do you support the Stock Act? And he goes on to write, Congress is exempt from insider trading laws and can use private information gained on the job to purchase stocks for profit. It's only legal to one class of Americans. Congress, do you support the Stock Act?
Yes, Chris, I do support the Stock Act. It's a travesty that we have members of Congress who may be taking advantage of their position to reach some type of financial advantage. And that just, again, is more evidence of how Congress is broken and how people like you and I have lost trust in our elected officials. I think we can't afford more of the same. We can't afford to put people in Congress who have worked their way up the political career ladder, and now, as a favor to those people who have helped them, they're going to pass laws or legislation or take certain actions to benefit those people. We need to start with a clean slate, especially in Oregon's 1st District. And I would add, I think it's very sad that we have members of Congress who are hiding the ball as far as how they are going about creating legislation. We need more transparency. And I have a proven record of working with people of various and different backgrounds to get something done.
Suzanne Bonamici.
I absolutely oppose insider trading, whether it be by members of Congress or anywhere else. That's inappropriate, and it makes people not trust their elected leaders. But let me talk just a little bit about my background, because I think it's important to this question. I started working for my mother's small business when I was in high school. And then I worked my way through community college, and law school, working at legal aid, helping struggling families. And then I went to work at the Federal Trade Commission in Washington, D.C. with federal legislation, cracking down on mortgage fraud, making sure that people got good information when they were entering into credit transactions. Then back home in Oregon, I represented small businesses. I was a leader in my community in improving public education as a community volunteer. And just the 5 years ago, I was elected to the legislature. I'm not a career politician. I'm someone who has a broad perspective from many different areas on how we should approach problems and how we can get them solved.
Mr. Cornilles, rebuttal, please.
Well, if the problem in Congress today was that we don't have enough lawyers, then I would think that Senator Bonamici would be a good choice. But the fact is, I don't think our problem today in Congress is that we don't have enough attorneys. I think it's that we don't have enough job creators. We don't have enough people who've actually dipped into their savings, as my wife Allison and I did 16 years ago, to start a business. Enough people who know how to stick and write and stick to a budget. Enough people who know how difficult it is to hire, and yet they do so anyway. This is the type of mentality we need more of in Oregon, and I believe I reflect that mentality.